quick note before the episode begins. On this new series of the Aequi podcast, we are going to be passing the mic over to some of our colleagues from our department so that they can share with you the interesting EU projects that we work on.
But don't worry, Tima and I are not going away. We'll be back soon. Enjoy this episode.
Welcome to Aequi, the podcast on all things on law and technology. I'm Katarzyna.
And I'm Marie-Catherine.
And welcome to another episode on the Pass the Mic series, where we discuss the EU Horizon 2020 funded project, Katy.
Thank you, Tima and Paul, for passing the mic again. We are very happy to be here today to talk about another excellent EU-funded Horizon 2020 project we are working on. A project which aims to build a precise, personalized medicine system empowered by artificial intelligence, which predicts the response of kidney cancer to targeted therapies. But first, let us introduce ourselves, Katarzyna. Would you like to tell us, the audience, a bit more about you?
Of course. But first of all, thank you also from my side, Tima and Paul. It is a great pleasure to be here and introduce the audience to the Katy Project. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm Katarzyna Barut, a research associate, as my colleagues, at the department. And together with Marie-Catherine, I am involved in the Katy Project. But beyond Katy, I'm also involved in another great project in the health research area, namely the virtual brain cloud. You could listen to our colleagues, Mariana and Michelle, describing it in more detail in the episode 3 of this series. I think that's all about me. So Marie-Catherine, your turn. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So if you listened to our last episode, you might have already known me. So 2 weeks ago, I was also here talking about our excellent project, Privacy for Kids. However, just in case you missed it, so I'm also a research associate at the department. I have been working here for almost 3 years now. I'm also involved in several research projects. Most of them are, as this one, health-related projects. And I'm happy to be here, and let's talk about the Katy Project. So would you like to tell us a bit more about the project itself?
Yes, with pleasure. Katy, this is the abbreviation, but the full name of the project is Knowledge at the Tip of Your Fingers, Clinical Knowledge for Humanity. And in this project, we aim to build a precise personalized medicine system empowered by artificial intelligence, which would predict the response of kidney cancer, but to be precise, renal cancer, to targeted therapies. We propose the system that would bring the AI-empowered knowledge to the tips of the fingers of clinicians and clinical researchers. And the system is built around two main components, a distributed knowledge graph and a pool of explainable AI predictors. And all of it would be available to the clinicians and clinical researchers on a Katy platform, which would be web mobile-based solution that would be easily accessible to all of those mentioned parties. And why we decided to do it. So the Katy Project addresses the EU mission area, which is cancer, and tackles one of the biggest challenges we currently face. I was actually surprised when I got to know that the statistics show that it is predicted that by 2035, 4.3 million people will be newly diagnosed with cancer in Europe every year. And actually, this is representing a 23% increase from today's figures if no further action is taken. So that's why reversing these trends is a critical challenge in the 21st century. And Katy, along with other initiatives in this mission area, aims to help more people, first of all, live without cancer, and to ensure more cancer patients are diagnosed early, suffer less, and well, at the end of the day, have a better quality of life after treatment. What else? I would add that in comparison to other projects in the department, our project is in a quite early phase. We just launched it at the beginning of the year, and there is still a lot to explore because the project is planned to last until the end of 2024.
So how is the project structured?
The project is structured, so we have a split into three main phases. The first phase is to define user requirements, to map them to the technical specifications, and to define the system architecture. And the second phase would capitalize on the developed system to perform a pre-study pilot. And in the third phase, that would be the final phase, we will include a clinical study and the evaluation of the final system in real-life conditions. And the results of the clinical study will be analyzed on the drugs recommendation, and treatments will be collected at the end of the project. So I think that that's it about this. But I think that we also should point out who we are collaborating with. Marie-Catherine, would you like to?
Yes, I think it's worth mentioning that Katy is one of the biggest projects we are involved at the department. So 20 partners from 11 countries collaborate to develop the mentioned platform. But this is only feasible because renowned research institutes and other experts from different fields work really closely together. We're in daily interaction, and clinicians, computer infrastructure experts, data scientists, artificial intelligence experts, security experts, and many, many more are working daily together to make this feasible. So what is our role here? So we are playing again the role of legal and ethical consultant, and we provide expertise in the field of data protection, ethics, data governance, and data management. So we assist partners in drafting legal documents such as the informed consent, the data processing, and joint controllership agreements. We also help to determine what privacy and security requirements shall be taken into account. In this project, we also have an institution called Legal Help Desk, where partners can pose all kinds of questions and ask for legal support. So in my opinion, partners gladly use this possibility to make sure that everything they do is legally compliant. But what is, in your opinion, one of the most important challenges we're facing and at the moment?
I would say that one of very interesting and actually also challenging topics at the moment is the question related to the anonymization and pseudonymization of the data we process in the project or aim to process in the project. We are going to process various types of data that come from various sources, publicly available data sets and private, so to say private, but actually the data sets collected by the partners involved in the project. And these data are maybe considered as data concerning health or genetic data in the meaning of the GDPR. And each of these data types conveys different information about the tumor, but also the question is what kind of information it conveys about an individual, a data subject. And here, in accordance with the GDPR regulation, which most probably many of you are familiar with, but maybe not. So the principles of data protection should apply to any information concerning an identified or identifiable natural person and should not apply to anonymous information. And this already poses, so here we can pose a lot of questions. So first of all, what is the anonymous information exactly? Is an individual identifiable from the data we process? In the next steps to determine whether a natural person is identifiable, account should be taken of all the means reasonably likely to be used to identify this person, directly or indirectly. And then the next question, what exactly are the means reasonably likely to be used? By whom shall they be reasonably likely used? By the controller, by another person. This is what GDPR states, but then who exactly is this another person? So as you can see, there are plenty of questions that we need to address. We also need to consider whether genomic data can be actually really truly fully anonymized, especially taking into account the current very advanced technology, which allows for very detailed processing of the data and for extracting a wide set of information about the human being's health and genetics. So yes, taking that all into consideration, we need to identify and clarify if the data are anonymized or pseudonymized, because that leads to different legal implications, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I fully agree. It's a big challenge we're facing at the moment because pseudonymized data is considered as personal data. So the GDPR is entirely applicable and therefore needs to have a legal basis. So this is in particular challenging in this project since we will use data from various data sources and not always the same legal basis would fit. So we need to differentiate when it comes to the source. So first, we will also use data from publicly available databases where scientific research will in most cases be the appropriate legal basis. But in a second step, we will also gather data from clinical partners directly from patients. So here the legal basis will be in accordance with the GDPR and the ethical requirements, the informed consent.
Yes, that's true. And informed consent may be a legal basis for processing of this type of data. And this is important not only for processing of the patient's data, but for conducting the research in general. Because here we need to consider what is informed consent from the ethical point of view, what is the informed consent from the data protection point of view. And in general, patient has to be informed about the research, its aims, risks related to the research and participation in it. The patient should know what will happen with their data and with the samples that we use to gather further information on the tumor, on the disease that is valuable for the development of the project and of the Katy platform. And in collaboration with the Katy partners, we discussed data protection and ethical requirements applicable in this regard and what information shall be provided to ensure that the patients are properly informed about the steps that will be taken in the course of the research and in the context of processing of the patient's data, so that the patients can make truly informed consent whether they would like to participate in the research or not. Yes, as I stated, here we need to also think about differentiation, how to differentiate the ethical informed consent and the data protection informed consent. I would say that here, in accordance with the GDPR and ethical requirements, the patient is really in the center. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. It has a high degree of self-determination, the patient. So it's really in the center. But let's change the perspective a little bit and talk about the partners again involved in the project. So as I already mentioned earlier, 20 partners are collaborating in this exciting project. So in my experience, it is always challenging at the beginning to evaluate the roles in the project, who is doing what, why, and when. So do you share this view with the audience, so about how the project is organized?
Yes, I would say that here we have different layers that we need to take into account. So first of all, this is just the project management layer, where we have different roles that are required for this type of in this type of the project. We have the role of the coordinator. In our case, this is the University of Rome, Tor Vergata, who is taking the lead for the whole project. Then we have work package leaders who are responsible for coordination of the work in the so-called work packages, where we have several tasks gathered together that should be then performed in the course of the project. We have task leaders, so the partners who are responsible for a specific activity in the project, for leading that activity. And we have contributors, so the partners who support the task leader in providing the appropriate services, resources that would allow to then fulfill the responsibilities, the requirements that we have set in the project in the grant agreement. In general, the split of the roles helps to define who is responsible for what, who has to deliver what and in what time. And that eases a lot the work in such a broad groups of different institutions. And the second layer that I mentioned is actually, it relates to the processing of personal data. And this is something that we are mostly interested in. Namely, we have different roles that are defined in the GDPR. We have controllers, we have joint controllers, when the controllers jointly determine purposes and means of processing of data. We have processors, so the parties, the partners who do not participate in the process of this determination of the purposes and means, but still process the data on behalf of other partners who are controllers and joint controllers. And this is where we assist the partners to assess who is supposed to assume which role in the project. And then we help to structure it formally. So we prepare the agreements, joint controllership agreements, data processing agreements. Since this is this process of collection, of further processing and sharing the data is, as you mentioned, rather complex in this type of a project and in such a broad group. Also, this identification of the roles is sometimes challenging, I would say. But in general, I think that with regard to sharing the data and to the data transfer, one thing is that we need to think about those roles. But then on top of this, we also need to consider that some partners are not based in the EU. And
yes,
right, this is also
that's true.
important.
So it's not only about the roles or how the legal basis, how to gather all the data, but we also have the challenge that we have partners sitting outside of the EU. So these partners are therefore considered as third country, and the GDPR does not apply. In order to be able to share any data with these partners, additional measures needs to be in place. Article 45 GDPR, however, states that personal data may be transferred to a third country where the Commission has decided that a third country in question ensures an adequate level of protection. So we have one partner from the UK. As we all know, the UK left the EU in 2020, and at the beginning of the project, we were not sure whether an adequacy decision will be taken for the UK.
Yeah, actually, I need to point it out. We have two partners from the UK.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, that's true.
No, it's totally fine, I think. But anyway, yes,
but
yes,
the same rule applies
the same rule applies
for
yes,
both. So
yes.
I'm sorry, I made a mistake. So it's two partners. But let's go back to the topic of the adequacy decision. So the decision has been adopted end of June, so after the beginning of the project, and the transfer of personal data is not subject to any additional measures anymore, which might have delayed our collaborative work. Because if we had to find out all the additional measures, this would delay the work we have been.
I fully agree. And in general, we also in the project need to take into consideration other legal acts or legal uncertainties that we have, which may have impact on our project. And I would say that here we have also legal acts such that are drafted at the European level that are currently at the proposal stage, which once they have been adopted in the current or slightly modified form, they can also influence how the project would look like and what kind of legal requirements we would need to address. And I would say, to provide some examples, I guess that you will agree, we could state that we have here AI regulation or the Data Governance Act, or even the Digital Services Act, because we are creating an online platform at the end of the project. I would say that with regard to the Data Governance Act, we need to think about the fact that it should regulate conditions for the reuse of certain categories of data that are held by public sector bodies. And it is supposed to regulate sharing personal and non-personal data in general. And it also introduces and promotes the notion of data altruism, which we are, I would say, very in favor of. This notion aims to allow the data used by individuals and companies for the common good. In this regard, we need to think about what is the definition of the public sector bodies to to then state whether this act is applicable to us. And actually considering the character of the Katy partners, where the vast majority represents public sector institutions, it's not excluded that once this act entered into force, it will be applicable to the project. And what's next?
So part of the project is focused on the development of advanced explainable AI prediction models that allow us, for example, to enrich histological data with molecular profiling information and other very advanced technologies.
I totally agree. So these models actually, once incorporated in the Katy platform, will serve the clinicians in finding treatment recommendations, and they will be totally automatized.
Yeah,
and
so
they are based on the AI.
Yeah, in early 2021, the European Commission published a proposal for an AI regulation. So the AI regulation is supposed to apply to providers that places AI systems on the market or put AI systems into service, regardless of whether those providers are established in the EU or in a third country. So taking this into account, we might have to consider that the requirements that will be set out in the regulations will also become relevant for the Katy project.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And this is what we are monitoring and observing the next developments in this regard. And also, I mentioned before that the Digital Services Act might be also or should be taken into consideration in the project. Because this act aims to regulate the acting of the online platforms. We are also developing an online platform, though the Digital Services Act shall apply to the online platforms that are providing the information society services. And here, the major question that we should answer is whether our solution could be considered an informed society service, because there are also different provisions that we should take into account whether to state whether this is an informed society service or not.
Well, so a lot of challenges we're facing. So and these are just examples of acts that are in the making and that require further monitoring by the project. So as the project is planned to last until 2024, we cannot be certain that no other new ideas, new challenges in the legal scope that may be applicable to the project appear. So this is why, in our view, it is very important for the project to have someone who provide legal support and observe the changes that emerge in the course of the project.
Yeah, that's true. That's always a useful asset in the project. As you can see, yes, the projects such as Katy, as you could have heard also in the previous episodes, they need to take into consideration various legal requirements and adhere to them. And it might be that the major ones stem from the data protection regulations, so the major requirements, and relate to the manner how the data, especially personal data, shall be managed in the project. But this is not only this, not only those aspects have to be considered, but also other acts that we described. And in the project, this one, we have to have a look at and understand what is the material and territorial scope of the applicable regulations, what roles defined in those relevant acts are assigned to or should be assigned to the partners, what legal basis do we have to process the personal data for research purposes. And finding the answers to all of those questions may seem sometimes challenging, but actually this is what makes this type of research very involving and very exciting as well. And once we achieve the outcome that we wanted, it's also very rewarding.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But I think we're coming to the end. So thank you for listening. We are pleased that I have been invited again, but today with you, Katarzyna, I've been invited to talk about our interesting project. And I think we can say that we keep you posted on the developments on the project through our website and social media channels.
Yes, definitely. If you would like to find out more about our project, please have a look at the description of this episode. You can find there some useful links. to follow. Thank you once again, Tima and Paul, for inviting us, and everyone for listening to this podcast. Take care. Bye.